We are counting down the top 10 matches in SummerSlam history. This week we have arrived at the number 7 spot for a match that took place at SummerSlam 2013. John Cena defends the WWE World Championship against Daniel Bryan with Triple H as the special guest referee. Take you back in time, this was during a year, in which Daniel Bryan had been teaming with Kane. They were Team Hell No. And they had just lost the tag team titles to The Shield in May. And Bryan was enjoying, at this point, he was enjoying as much crowd support as he had had at any other point during his run in WWE. This guy was over like gangbusters with the live crowds. The yes chants were in full force. He was on an upward trajectory in terms of his popularity. People loved this guy. And on the June 17th, I had to look up the exact date. I knew it was in June. June 17th, 2013 episode of Monday Night Raw. Daniel Bryan had a match against Randy Orton. And in his book, which by the way you can get for free if you use our Audible trial, a little plug there, audibletrial.com/Solomonster. You can get Daniel Bryan's book for free. In his book, Bryan said that he was supposed to win that match. And it would have been the biggest win of his career. And it would have helped transition him from the kind of the comedic role that he had been in to a person that people could really take seriously as a headliner. So there was a move in the match where he did a dive through the ropes. Bryan crashed head and neck first, into the barricade. Right away, he feels this pain shooting down his right arm. Match continues. Later on, he hits this big drop kick off the top rope, lands flat back on the mat. And when he does, he loses feeling immediately in both arms. And he can't stand up. Randy Orton at one point comes over. He's like, hey, it's funny in the book too. Like Orton comes over and calls him Dan. It's like, hey, Dan, what the fuck? He had no idea. He's like, what's going on here? He had no idea that he was hurt. So the doctor can see that something is wrong here. The doctor tries to stop the match. Bryan will not let him. He's not in his right mind here. He will not let him stop this match. Before anybody can stop the match and ring the bell, because they're outside when this happens, Bryan races back into the ring and just starts going at it with Orton. He starts throwing punches. He's like, come on, let's wrestle here, so they can't stop the match. Orton throws him out of the ring, still not knowing that he's hurt. Gives Bryan a back suplex, drops him right on top of the barricade. And at that point, they stop the match, and Bryan was furious. This was going to be his big moment. He felt like he was robbed of the biggest win of his career. He felt like he could continue the match. They just took my moment away from me. Now, of course, you look at it objectively, it was the right call to make, but he didn't see it that way. And when he got to the back, he lost his shit. He flipped out in a way that nobody had ever seen from him before. He's always the quiet, funny, mild-mannered guy, big smile on his face. Not when he came to the back. When he came to the back, he was cussing F-bombs all over the place. And he gets right up in Triple H's face. Triple H is the one who told the doctor to end the match. Triple H was on headset. It was his call to tell the doctor to call the match off. Things got so heated between the two of them, people had to step in between them to separate them. And Bryan's whole issue was, listen, you're a hypocrite. You tore your quad during a match, and you kept wrestling. Of course, the big difference is that was a muscle tear. This was a guy who couldn't feel his arms. He had one arm dangling at his side when he was trying to perform. Big difference. Although I would say it wasn't too bright for Triple H to do that either. Just like it wasn't too bright for him to tear his pec, 5 minutes into the match at Crown Jewel last year and keep going. I kind of wish that whole match never would have taken place. But at least it wasn't a head injury. So a week later, Bryan gets his big win over Orton, beats him with the yes lock, which set up Brad Maddox, the then Raw general manager and noted filmographer, announcing that John Cena would be allowed to choose his SummerSlam opponent. And the man that he ended up choosing was Daniel Bryan. And on TV in the weeks that followed, we got Vince McMahon referring to Bryan as a B-plus player. You're not somebody who fits the mold of what a world champion ought to be. It was the start of Daniel Bryan against the Authority before even the big plot twist took place at SummerSlam. So there were a couple of wild cards coming into this match. We had Triple H as the guest referee. And we had the looming threat of Randy Orton and the Money in the Bank briefcase, because the month before, that show was in Philly, because I know that I was at that show. Randy Orton won the Money in the Bank briefcase. So you had the looming threat. Will he cash in, or is he going to save it for another day? So here we had Cena and Bryan. It was Mr. Nikki Bella against Mr. Brie Bella. Babyface against babyface, although Cena was hardly cheered like a babyface coming into this match. People wanted badly to see Daniel Bryan win this match. They booed John Cena. It was, I would say it was very similar. I can't say it was worse for Cena than it would have been in Chicago for the Money in the Bank match he had with CM Punk, but it was almost on that level where everything Cena did from the moment his music hit to the time he came out and every time he would go on offense, he got booed by this crowd. They did not like this guy. And, you know, it was a hot crowd too inside the Staples Center, but they did not like John Cena. Cena came into this match injured. Cena had a partial triceps tear, and he had a brace on his elbow. And the next night on Raw, he did not have a brace on his elbow. He showed off his elbow, and it was disgustingly swollen. He had this giant baseball-sized lump on the end of his elbow from this buildup of fluid. I think it was bursitis, I think it was. And he announced, I got to go away for 4 to 6 months and have surgery. And everybody in the building cheered and chanted, yes, yes, yes. What a bunch of assholes. Seriously. What a bunch of gigantic assholes. And you know, one day, and look, I used to be one of those people because Cena was so overexposed. And there were so many people who I think could have gone a lot farther than they did, and instead they decided we got to give the win to John Cena. Now, you can't blame John Cena for all of that because he wasn't booking the shows. You know, it was kind of different than, let's say, Triple H in 2002, who was sitting in on all the production meetings and did have some influence. That's not what Cena was doing, but still, I would rail against that constantly. You know, for example, why did he have to beat Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 30? Why ask why? It's one of those questions that you'll never know the answer to. But one day, people are going to look back and realize how much worse off that company would have been had they not had John Cena around. Part of the problem was their failure to create other stars like him. Orton, I would say, you know, Orton was never quite on the same level as Cena. In terms of star power, he was always a shade below. They were never able to create another, even, forget Austin and Rock and all them. They were never able to create another John Cena. They've tried with Roman Reigns, and he's kind of filled those shoes, but he's not at the level that Cena was at when Cena was at his full height of popularity. So it was their failure to create someone else on that level and build everything around one person, which I think is stupid. It is the most idiotic thing in the world. Let's build around one guy. So then the guy gets hurt, or he leaves and becomes part-time and starts doing movies, and then you're fucked because you never bothered to create another 1 or 2 people on the same level. That's on the company. That's not Cena's fault. But this guy, you know, he busted his ass for that company. I think history will be a lot kinder to him as time goes on, especially now when you look at how far they've fallen in terms of attendance and ratings and just overall interest in the product. It's like, you know, it's like they say, you can't really judge the legacy of a president until 20 or 30 years after they've left office. I don't think we're going to have to wait that long to figure out how important John Cena was to WWE, but I do think a lot of people will reach this point, if they haven't already, where they look back and they're like, hey, you know what, that guy wasn't so bad, or man, I kind of missed that guy, or boy, you know, the way things are now, they sure were lucky to have him around back then. I mean, look at this case. The guy wrestled with a baseball in his elbow, and he still had one of the best matches all year in 2013. And one of the best matches in SummerSlam history, which is why it's on this list. Consistently, John Cena delivered in big pay-per-view matches like this. So the match starts. First thing I notice is the giant sign in the crowd that reads, "Smarten up, Dixie," which was funny back then, and it's still funny to me now. Bryan was just so over here. The man could do no wrong. We got some mat wrestling at the start, which was always fun, trying to see John Cena do some chain wrestling and monkey flips and that sort of thing. Cena gave Bryan a suplex onto the ring, or actually off the ring steps, onto the floor. to chants of "You still suck," which made me laugh. Later on, Cena went for the STF. Bryan ended up using Cena's own hold on him, showing him the proper way to apply an STF, which John Cena never quite got right. There was a spot where Bryan hit a superplex to Cena, but he had his legs on the inside of the ring. So that when he superplexed Cena, Cena went down, but Bryan was sort of hanging upside down like in a tree of woe. And actually, it's very smart. I think more wrestlers ought to do that. When you think about it, when you hit a superplex, you're taking as much of the brunt of the impact as your opponent. It's kind of a stupid thing to do, for being honest. So Bryan was smart. He goes, I'm going to hook my legs. So you go fall to the mat, and I'll just kind of hang here. So he's hanging upside down. He muscles his way back up into a vertical position, climbs up top, hits the diving headbutt for a near fall. Later on, Cena tried a super AA off the top. Bryan tried to counter it, though, hitting a Rana off the top, but Cena held on to him. And you're watching this, right? Cena's got Bryan hanging upside down. You're wondering, what the hell is he going to do with him in that position? He hops off the ropes with Bryan. He wasn't trying to execute a move. He wasn't trying to pile drive the guy. But he's got him in this position. And he's got him in his clutches, just kind of hanging there. And it looked like he dropped him right on his head. The crowd reacted as if he just dropped this guy on his head, even though he didn't. He actually had him in a good position for a Styles clash if he wanted to hit one. But instead, he transitioned into an STF. Later on, we had an epic New Japan-esque slap battle between these two men, both men channeling their inner fighting spirit, smacking the crap out of each other. We have an attitude adjustment attempt by Cena, countered into a small package for a near fall. Bryan lays out Cena with a kick to the head. And then, Bryan debuts the running knee as his new finish, borrowed from Kenta. Just like Punk borrowed the GTS from Kenta. It's too bad he didn't have more success in that company when he was there, because those guys sure did, using his moves. They had a lot more success than Kenta did. And with that knee, which looked like it connected pretty good, Bryan scored the rare, clean pinfall in the middle over John Cena to win his first WWE Championship in an excellent main event. It cannot be understated how big of a win this was for Bryan, because not many people could say up to that point that they had beaten John Cena clean in the middle of the ring. I'd say after 2005 or so, when he first became world champion. Obviously, when he was wrestling Kurt Angle and The Undertaker, and he was the United States champion, I'm sure Cena got pinned a whole bunch of times. But after 2005 or so, it didn't happen. I wouldn't say it happened very often. Shawn Michaels pinned him on Raw once. Batista pinned him at SummerSlam. The Rock pinned Cena that first match they had at WrestleMania. But look at the names I just mentioned. Shawn Michaels, Batista, The Rock. Those are big names. And now Daniel Bryan could count himself among those names. This took him to that next level. And the handshake from Cena that came after the match and the next night on Raw, that was an endorsement. That meant something. Now, Bryan had tagged Cena in the eye at one point during the match. Cena's eye, when this was over, was badly swollen. I thought it was either from the slap battle that they had or maybe the flying knee. But I actually think it came earlier on a drop kick, because Cena's eye, really for the remainder of the match, just didn't look right. So I think he tagged him pretty early in the match. Then there's the big celebration. Triple H is buddying up to Bryan and shaking his hand and congratulating him. Bryan, they give him a confetti bath, a big pyro celebration. We don't get those anymore unless it's WrestleMania or Sweet Saudi Money. But here he got the pyro and the confetti. They really wanted you to forget that Randy Orton had that Money in the Bank briefcase. They did everything they could except put the copyright box on the screen. I guess that's a Tommaso Ciampa thing. And as he's celebrating, all of a sudden Randy Orton's music hits. And it's fun to watch these things back. You look into the crowd, you see people wearing the beard shirts, the yes shirts, clearly, all the Daniel Bryan fans, and it's like they could see what's about to happen, and like their heart just sinks, and I just laugh. So Orton comes out, and Bryan sees him, and Bryan is like in fighting stance, like, come on, you want to fight me? Come on down. Meanwhile, Triple H is still in the ring. That should have been a giveaway that something was about to happen. And Orton changes his mind. He raises the briefcase. He says, you know what, I'll do this a different day. And he goes to leave. And then he stops. And he very slowly turns and looks back into the ring. As we would find out, he's actually looking at Triple H, kind of giving him the high sign. And Triple H comes up from behind Bryan, kicks him in the gut, hits a pedigree. Orton comes in, cashes in his contract, rolls over Bryan, pins him 1, 2, 3, and just like that, Randy Orton is a 7-time WWE champion. I thought then, and I still feel now watching that back, he should have at least picked up Bryan or revived him and then hit an RKO or something. It was, I don't know, just really never sat well with me that it was just one pedigree and, 60 seconds go by. But then again, I mean, he hit the one pedigree on Booker T at WrestleMania 19, and some say Booker T is still laying there. So I guess his pedigree has, quite the magical effect on people. It just knocks people out. It's so devastating. It puts them to sleep. On the podcast at the time, my prediction for this, how this would all go down, was that Bryan would win the championship at SummerSlam, and then Orton would cash in his contract on Raw the very next night and win the title with an assist from Triple H. So I was off by one night, but that was the plan I was hoping for, and that's how it played out. And I thought it was just this really cool surprise twist when it happened. I thought it was fantastic. And I was a big Bryan fan, and I could see where people would be frustrated. But that's wrestling. It was an angle to turn somebody heel. This is what wrestling is all about. I mean, these are the kinds of angles and storylines that people, they went nuts over 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And I thought they executed this perfectly. I thought this was very well done. Now, I grew very tired of the authority stuff after a while, but the big swerve at the end here to sort of kick things off, I thought it just played out beautifully. And Bryan now has the distinction, little trivia note, of losing the World Heavyweight title in 18 seconds at WrestleMania and losing the WWE title in 7 seconds the next year at SummerSlam. So we had the march to WrestleMania 30 that came after this because Cena went away. Cena had to go away to have his injury taken care of. Bryan was in the prime babyface position, and he had a whole bunch of matches with Randy Orton. They had Shawn Michaels get involved. He was the referee for a Hell in a Cell match between them. Even Bryan in the book, talks about how the way things were playing out, even he thought that they were setting up for a WrestleMania match with him and Shawn Michaels. He was all amped up. And then it wasn't until he actually talked to Shawn and had a conversation with him that he came to the realization that this guy is not wrestling ever again. He has no intention of coming back and ever wrestling again. Oops. So that match didn't happen, and that would have been a hell of a match. And we all know the story as it unfolded. Bryan went to WrestleMania. He beat Triple H. He went to the main event. This great comeback story. He became the World Heavyweight Champion, got another confetti celebration. This played out in a lot of ways like, probably what Vince McMahon was hoping for with Lex Luger back in 1993. They ended up not putting the title on Luger at SummerSlam because Vince McMahon wanted to hold off until WrestleMania and give the big coronation to Luger the following year. The only problem is he waited too long. People never stopped caring about Daniel Bryan. If anything, he only got more popular. Lex Luger became less popular. And they had another babyface way up on the food chain that people loved, and his name was Bret Hart. So things didn't exactly work out the way that Vince McMahon probably originally was hoping for with Lex Luger. But in this case, Bryan had the win. He very briefly got a taste of the championship, and then it was just him against the authority. But Bryan even admits in his own book he was going to be 5th or 6th from the top at WrestleMania in just a regular singles match against Sheamus, were it not for CM Punk leaving when he did. It was this happy coincidence, this happy kind of confluence of circumstances. It just all came together like a perfect storm. People were pissed. They turned on Batista, not because of anything Batista did at the Royal Rumble, but because he wasn't Daniel Bryan. And then Punk left, and they were without a match for Triple H, and so it's like, well, maybe we ought to try this Daniel Bryan guy. So in the end, we got the great payoff, but we almost didn't get it.